So much for that takeover of the Columbus City Schools.
From the Battelle studio at WOSU at COSI, this is Columbus on the Record. Joining Mike Thompson this week, Kathy Kandinsky, State House reporter for the Columbus Dispatch, Bill Cohen, State House correspondent for Ohio Public Radio, Terry Casey, Republican strategist, and Sam Gresham of Common Cause Ohio.
For months, the Columbus Education Commission, appointed by Mayor Coleman, has been studying how to fix the Columbus City Schools. Prompted by a data rigging scandal, the commission held meetings, listened to community members, national experts. The expectation, and the fear of some, was the panel would recommend a major change in governance of the city's school system. It didn't. No mayoral takeover, no change in the makeup of the school board. The panel did make some recommendations. It wants a completely independent auditor to monitor school data and finances. It suggests the mayor appoint a non-voting member of the school board. It would establish a separate, unelected panel that would raise and spend $50 million on innovative education programs. It would give principals more authority, and it would dump the governance model where no one is allowed to disagree in public, the policy governance model. Kathy Kandinsky, this really is not anywhere near close to a radical takeover of the schools by someone else.
No, I mean, and you're referring obviously to the Cleveland schools, and that was a mayoral takeover, and that involved legislation that allowed the mayor, gave the mayor some additional authority over the schools. This is more like recommendations, although what might be similar is we may see some legislation that makes these that would require these recommendations to be implemented. I've heard some talk about that. Nothing's been introduced yet, but it really is more of a Columbus fashioned solution, and really that's the only comparison I would make with the Cleveland schools. It's a list of recommendations, like you said in your opening.
And the real problem is this really going to solve anything? Last Friday night I was at the program at Fort Hays with Artie Duncan, the very impressive education secretary for the president. They spoke. All the things sound great, but the big question is who's going to be in charge? Because if you're going to change and fix things, just hiring a new school superintendent, in my view, is not enough. And I think from people I talk to, key people in the business community want a bigger real fix, but I'm not sure that the mayor and some other people are willing to support that.
Here's what the schools have now. They have an auditor who is supposed to be independent. Now, he or she works for the school department, so you wonder if they're really independent. But they do have an auditor who, in theory, is independent. The mayor has an education office director, and in reality, the school board always had to go to the business community and to the mayor to put a levy on the ballot to make sure they were okay with it. So what's changed?
I'm in complete disclosure. I'm leading a coalition to oppose this, to take over the schools. We're happy that they've taken that proposal off the table. We're not happy about the legislation that exists for the stress thing, but we're happy that the mayor understood that the community did not want that to happen. And the mayor said all along that he did not want that to happen. It's just that people didn't believe him. Now we believe him, and we hope that he will combine with us and go fight this legislation so we can get it off the table.
Sam's talking about the legislation where if a school system is found to have rigged data with the intent of rigging it, that they could be taken over by the state superintendent. That's pending in the legislature. It's not been finalized yet.
I've said it before. I'll just say it again. I think a lot of people don't care how the Columbus schools are governed. I know the movers and shakers, that's a big deal. Who's in control? I think a lot of people want to know, when is somebody going to come up with a program that finally gets all parents to read to their kids before they go to preschool, that makes sure all parents make sure their kids go to class, do their homework, and respect the teachers. And I know it's a tough sell. How do you do it? But it seems to me that's what a lot of people want to see. And maybe that $50 million in this innovative fund, right? There's a special fund. Yep. Maybe if somebody can figure out a way to spend some of that money and do that, I think a lot of people think that is one of the keys to
Bill, I support you 100% because the educational process starts at home. And if you get the proper support from home, you'll be more likely to be successful in the educational process. Unfortunately, in the report that came out. They didn't talk much about that. They didn't talk much about poverty. They didn't talk much about how to get parents engaged to that degree. But other than that, I applaud Council President Ginther, and I applaud the mayor for having the temerity and the tenacity to put this committee together to try and do something.
But the facts are that we have roughly 60 buildings, I think, of the 141 that are basically, by objective standards, failing. A lot of it's the parents, but we also got to figure out how to give principals and the teachers, because the teachers have not been named in any of these problems, to give them more role and flexibility, because in a district like Columbus, you got a lot of diversity. You've got Appalachian poor, you got African American, you've got more upscale parts of the city. How do you give each different school the power to grow and serve the parents, connect with the parents and the students?
Well, I think one of the most impressive recommendations that I've heard is the one that would empower building principals. That's nothing new. That's been suggested in all kinds of education venues, but that was included in there, and giving the building principals more authority so they can craft what is needed in their schools. They know the students best, and hopefully when things are more individualized at the school level, that might bring parents in. But you can't legislate. You can't require parents to do the things you're talking about. It just can't happen.
One of the things that's come up is this independent auditor, and the recommendation says that the auditor has a role to play in school levies. It reads, in light of the knowledge of district finances and performance measures that will reside in the independent auditor, the Columbus Board of Education should, keyword being should, seek the advice and support of the independent auditor in order to place a levy on the ballot. Some read that as the auditor will have veto power, even though it says should, not must. Do you see it that way, Sam?
There are two things in that. First, I'll respond to that. They should seek the advice. I don't know if they need the support. The second part of that concerns me is that he or she has subpoena power. I don't think that's necessary for a position like that. So those are the two issues that we are concerned at. But overall, we have no problem with that. You said it. They have an auditor who's similar to that, but they don't have the subpoena power.
Well, but the difficulty is it's unclear. It says the different people, including the probate judge and the mayor and the city auditor, would be involved in picking this person. But for whom does this auditor work? Who approves the budget? It's just unclear who's going to report to whom. And if you don't have anyone in charge who's responsible, you're going to have a problem. And the principal thing, I mean, principals are absolutely vital, just like great teachers. But if you have a bureaucracy and or a superintendent who can't communicate, can't pick the right principals, how do you make the system work?
That is the key, though. It's who is the next superintendent? Whoever this person is really, that's the key to this whole game, right?
And if you really think about it, given what's gone on before, a lot of candidates are not interested in this position because of the tug of war that's gone on. So you're going to have to take time to find the right person who has the right combination. The principal thing, too, I've lived through both ends of that. A good principal is the greatest thing since sliced bread. But if you got a bad principal, God, it's hard to get rid of him.
Sets the tone, yeah.
Yeah, he or she sets that
And
tone.
a lot of the current principals are very unhappy because you've got control freaks at the central offices of the schools that say, cover things up. We don't want to hear about problems. Don't do anything too innovative because somebody might complain. So how do you strike that balance?
They also give people power to do creative things. We have 12 schools in the Columbus system that are nationally recognized. Out of the top 100 schools in the state of Ohio, Columbus has 3. So they not only do they tell them to hide stuff, but they also let them free to be creative.
Don't you think that innovation fund is going to encourage them because they're going to be more directly competing with charter and other types of schools to do different things? And Columbus has really done a good job, I think, over the years of doing innovative things. They have a lot of different types of high schools that are very sought after and such, and I would expect to see more with that fund.
We could talk about this, and we will talk about this for many weeks to come as this plays out. But once again, a candidate who explores the opportunity of seeking higher office finds at the end of that exploration that he indeed does want to run for that higher office. Cuyahoga County Executive Ed Fitzgerald officially announced he would challenge John Kasich for governor. The Democrat immediately said, you know that Obama-Kasich recovery in Ohio we've been talking about? It's not so strong after all.
There's also certain things that have helped the national economy that John Kasich was opposed to, particularly the auto rescue. So yeah, we have seen some job growth. in this state. It's been pretty mild, and in some cases, such as the jobs that were created in the auto industry, if it had been up to John Kasich, those things wouldn't have happened.
John Kasich, still focused on his budget proposals, did not seem too worried about 2014.
It's all a matter of how people feel. You know, they feel their economic future is better, and it's up to them. I think right now they feel that way. We'll just have to see. Got to keep going, though, because if they don't think they're going to get their money's worth, you know, they'll look in another direction.
Sam Gresham, in 2010, Ted Strickland ran on the economy's bad, but it could have been worse. Now the Democrats are running, the economy's pretty good, but it could have been better.
Right. I think this is an interesting quandary for the citizen. But when you look at the red meat out there for the Democrats to lay out, voter suppression, issue 5, issue 2, whatever you want to call it, the question about who gets credit for the economy. I mean, there are a lot of what ifs. My concern is Fisher a strong enough candidate in the end with enough seasoning to really be able to take those issues on? I think Kasich has vulnerabilities, but I also think Kasich has some strength. It depends.
Well, I like Sam. You said some good things there, and the question, is Fitzgerald the best? Because if you look at, in Cleveland, his hometown, all of East County employees, he had only 300 people there. He comes to Columbus, 200. He had 125 in Cincinnati at a Union Hall. In Dayton the next day, he has 7 people. In Toledo, he has 40. Does he really have the ability to get the groundswell of support? Because overall, if people are happy, whether you give it Obama credit or Kasich credit, if they're happy, things are better, they tend to keep the incumbent there.
I think the economy is the key. I think we pretty much agree on that. And the Democrats were saying, oh, Ohio's economy was getting much better. They were saying in October, just before the election. And now they're saying, it's not so good. They do have something to back that up. Since October or September of last year, the unemployment rate then was about 7%. It's about 7% now. The number of people with jobs, almost exactly the same, 5.17 million. So really, things have plateaued since the Democrats were saying in September and October, just before the election, hey, things are getting pretty good. Things have...
Now, you know, at the same time, the other issue is how likable is the governor and how much support. And polls have shown support for Kasich has grown in the last year. So I think what Terry said, too, if people are happy, it doesn't really matter who they give credit to. They're less likely to make a call for a change. So, but, you know, at the same time, we're far out from this election. I mean, so many things could happen between now and then.
Kasich got a 30% approval rating 2 years ago. Now he's got a 52% approval rating. And, a year or two is an eternity. It could go back.
And out of this next budget, the governor's not going to be raising taxes. It's going to be a balanced budget.
But Medicare extension will become a political issue if it doesn't happen.
Well, but the governor, in your mind, and a lot of people's minds, been on the right side of that. And we'll talk about that later.
I think finally the key is Fitzgerald's team and their maturity and their ability to run an excellent campaign. I think he has good name recognition. He comes from the best county for a Democrat in the state, which is Cuyahoga. Now he's got to get everybody out. But Terry, your comments are valid. At this early stage, they don't look like they're ready for prime time. And if they get themselves together for prime time, I think this governor is vulnerable.
Good name recognition. No, I don't think so. I mean, Fitzgerald, I think the polls show most people have never heard of him.
Like
I mean, outside of Cleveland.
Don't know
what I'm
him.
saying.
Right.
It's a good ballot name.
In Cleveland, they know.
It's a ballot name, not recognition.
Oh, I see.
And even in Cleveland this week, his hometown newspaper ran an editorial with the headline that he faces an uphill climb, and they went through some of the issues that he's had in Cuyahoga County as county executive, including the guy just got there as county executive, hadn't completed the job, and he's already off running for governor. Right.
Well, we'll see.
Where have we heard that?
It never happens.
It's all the same stuff, isn't it?
Just change the names. It looks as if the Medicaid expansion, if it's going to happen, it's not going to happen in the state budget. State Senate President Keith Faber said, like the House, the Senate will remove the governor's plan from the budget. Governor Kasich wants Ohio to sign up for a major part of President Obama's health care law and expand Medicaid to 275,000 Ohioans. The feds would pick up all the costs for the first few years, but conservative Republicans don't want Ohio willfully taking part in any part of what they call Obamacare. So it's not going to happen in the budget. Is it going to happen at all, Terry?
I think Keith Faber opened a very good door because he basically said if we do it separate, it makes it easier to have a coalition of Democrat and Republican votes. And also, as we get later in the year, part of the problem is Obamacare. Some of the wheels are starting to come off that when you had the Montana Senate Finance Chairman Max Baucus basically say to the HHS secretary, hey, you haven't written the rules, it's confusing. If you can get some more rules, you can get some more time, it's easier to bring this up maybe separately apart from the budget and get it done.
Terry mentioned the coalition. Democrats will support this. There's probably some moderate Republicans who will support it if it gets to the floor. Will the leadership help it get to the floor?
I think that the group that is the hospital associations and the Chamber of Commerce is the key. I think moving it out of a budget is a strategy to allow that to pass. You must remember, please be, there were DIS funds that were there for disproportionate people who didn't come to hospitals and didn't have money. In the rural counties and in the urban community, that money is now gone. If you do not get the Medicare extension, these systems are not going to have the money to take care of those people.
Will it come to a vote?
I don't think it will come for a vote unless the more conservative Republicans are given some concession. Something, they keep saying, we don't want Medicaid expansion, we want Medicaid reform. Now, that could include some expansion, but they want it to have some kind of private insurance component. So they need to be given something. I think they do, if they're going to bring it to the floor.
What did they say? They want it if it can cover more people at a lower cost.
How do you do that?
How do you do that? I'm not sure how you do that. But key to your question, I think, is the fact that both the Senate President and the Speaker of the House, who control what comes to the floor, have both been on record opposing this. So I think it faces a really difficult battle once you take it out of the budget, where you could maybe get some other stuff.
Well, but I think Keith Faber's statements are really key because he is one of the key leaders, and if you do it separately, it gives you different flexibility. Remember, if you're going someplace, there's sometimes more than one road to get there. This might be another avenue to get there and achieve it.
Kathy, the alternative is out there is you take the Medicaid money. If the feds will allow Ohio to do it, take the Medicaid money, that $13 billion, and you use it to buy insurance for these 275,000 people. What are the chances of the feds going along with that?
Well, the federal regulators, first of all, I mean, just the way this works is the state has to submit a request for a waiver, they call it, and then the federal regulators say yes or no. There's no request been filed, but they've had some informal discussions about it, and they seem open to it. But I think it will all come down to cost. Is it going to be more expensive to insure through the private market, or is it going to be more expensive to insure through Medicaid? You know, whoever's paying the bill should care about that. That's taxpayers.
Yeah, but in the end, private insurance is going to cost more.
I would think, but they haven't been able to.
Why are they trying to save money? The government is taking care of this cost. Why is that important to save money?
Because, Sam, 3 or 4 years from now, we don't want to suddenly have a bait and switch of we were going to pay 90% of it, but now
take that on the face, and they take it on the face during an election year. You don't want that.
Well, it'll be a different president then, and if the feds only pay 70% of the cost instead of the 90%, that's billions extra that comes out of Ohio's hide.
I think the feds are going to be open to alternatives only because they want the states to participate in this. So they're going to be open, but to what extent, if it costs more, who knows?
All right. The two events may be unrelated, but the timing is a little curious. Last week, Attorney General Mike DeWine conducted raids on internet cafes in the Cleveland area, and he helped coordinate a raid on the New Jersey offices of an internet cafe operator. DeWine says the sweepstakes cafes, as they're called, are really illegal forms of gambling. Now, the Ohio Senate had been reluctant to regulate internet cafes, but that was until the raids. This week, the Senate agreed to consider internet cafe regulations. Bill Cohen, is this a coincidence, or are these two events related?
Well, as a reporter, I try to deal in facts, so I can't really say, but it does look very interesting, as if something happened, something was found in those raids that was embarrassing. And one really interesting thing, Faber, the Senate president, this week told his fellow Senate Republicans, I want you to give back all the campaign money you have gotten from any of these internet cafes or any of the owners. So that just seems to indicate that before they were, but a month ago, the Republican senators were saying, look, maybe we shouldn't shut them all down. Maybe we should regulate them. Maybe they're not all that bad. And now all of a sudden there's a turnaround, and so it makes you think something. Now Faber's saying we got to wash our hands of these
Well,
things.
Faber is being very smart because some people in his caucus watched what happened with the Cuyahoga County prosecutor turning over this information involving New Jersey, maybe some mob connections, and we've still got FBI agents. They put a couple state legislators in prison. There might be more to come. They didn't want to have more legislators having legal problems spelled FBI and potential indictments. So it was good to get this behind them, show the world we aren't connected to those kind of people.
Anymore. We're not connected anymore.
Absolutely.
How about just the pictures? I mean, those internet sweepstakes machines that we saw the police all pulling out, Sam, they looked like slot machines.
They look like slot machines
So
to me.
people say, wait a minute, that's not a sweepstakes, that's a slot machine. Maybe you ought to shut
and
them
you
down.
know, the math on those, I don't trust those machines because people can control how the outcome. If you want to give me ping pong balls that slide down through this thing and I have a random mathematical chance, I think it's horrible to how people are going. That's just SG. It's horrible to let people go there.
We know Sam's game of choice now.
Yeah.
Well, but I want to bet some more. I said last week I want to put a big bet on Mike DeWine. I want to double my bet. He's going to win in this whole thing because fighting potential New Jersey and mob people, that's even better.
I mean, real mob people.
Absolutely. Not amateurs from Ohio, but the real big ones.
Faber, though, said he was convinced by this latest appeals court ruling that, yes, this is illegal gambling. But earlier we had another ruling from the Toledo court that said it wasn't illegal. And I was asking, well, why don't you guys wait until the Ohio Supreme Court finally rules on this? And Faber said, well, even if the court rules it's okay, we can still take a public policy stand against them and shut them down. Again, an interesting turnaround.
Yeah. All right, our last topic. There are so many of these at intersections we hardly notice them unless you happen to run a red light and the flash bulbs go off. The number of red light cameras has been growing, as have the revenues generated by fines from those cameras. City officials say the cameras have cut sharply the number of serious accidents. Critics say they're nothing more than Big Brother's cash machine, and they say the cameras lead to more rear-end accidents. 3 lawmakers have filed a bill to ban them statewide. Bill Cohen, there are hundreds of these around the state. Any chance that they're going to be banned, the red light cameras?
I think there's a chance they could be banned. I'm pretty sure about 7 years ago they were banned in a bill that both the House and Senate passed. But on his way out the door, Governor Bob Taft vetoed it, and legislators didn't override. So I think there's some, even though the police like the cameras, and it's hard to go against the police, a lot of these legislators are hearing from their constituents, oh, it's unfair, we're being trapped, and there aren't any live police on duty to watch this, and it's outrageous. So I think there's a chance that they could pass a ban.
This is a case where legislators are representatives of the people because they drive, they might get tickets, they worry about speed limits and costing money.
No special interest to getting largesse.
They're representing. Well, actually, the worry on the money is the companies running these red lights. They suck a huge percentage. Most of them are out of state. Of the fees, most of it's not all going to just fund our local police departments. A huge amount of it's going out of state. But I think they're going to get a serious look at it and some serious, well-deserved debate.
If it passes, it's because it's more of an annoyance to the lawmakers than to anyone else.
Right. I don't really have a position on it. I haven't got caught by one, so I keep getting caught.
Ever? You've never?
No, it's the iPass.
We're going to check that.
In Illinois. Yeah, you can check it. It's the iPass in Illinois that gets me. You go
the
past,
tolls,
the toll road, and they write you them nice letters.
Yeah. But whenever Columbus puts them up, they have that month grace period, and they always show that the accidents go way down. The T-bone accidents, the really dangerous accidents, go way down. They're annoying, but they seem to work on those types of accidents.
75% reduction, they say, in a lot of the cameras. The first group of cameras where they were installed, the first 18, 75% reduction in crashes.
But I can see how rear enders would be up. I was in San Francisco many years ago when that was one of the first cities that have it, and this cabbie just slammed on the brakes. My face went up against the plastic, and he said, "Red light camera." So they're dangerous. Time now for our weekly off-the-record parting shots. Sam Gresham, you're up first.
Medicare expansion before the session is over will pass.
Medicaid.
Medicaid,
yes.
Medicaid expansion will pass.
Kathy almost stole my prediction because she mentioned something about we'll see things in campaigns that we've seen before. Well, don't be surprised that the anti-Josh Mandel ads about being an opportunist who's already running for one office before he's completed a term, it might come back on Mr. Fitzgerald, because both as mayor of Lakewood and now as county executive, he never seems to get the first term completed before he's off running for something else.
Bill.
Even if the economy is doing pretty well, Republicans could still defeat themselves in next year's governor's race if the Tea Party activists who think Kasich is too liberal, if they either challenge him as a third-party candidate or they just don't come out to vote in a two-way race in the general election, in a close race, perhaps the Democrat could still win.
And Kathy.
Well, I think, Sam, that the delay on this Medicaid expansion is the kiss of death for it. And so I'm going to predict that it's probably not going to come out.
Not at all, even with a compromise. No. My speaking of Josh Mandel and his wife are celebrating the birth of their daughter, their first child. You know, Josh Mandel takes a lot of heat for being youthful looking. There's nothing that will age him quicker than having a daughter. So congratulations to Josh Mandel for two things, having a daughter and the receding hairline he'll have soon. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online. We're on Facebook and we're on Twitter. You can connect to all of that at our website, wosu.org/COTR. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.